3 days later, Vextar stood on the bridge of his ship, completely recovered. He looked out through the large windows at the human camp below. The Aurora was being repaired by both human and Zilithian engineers working together. "Commander," said his communications officer, "the High Council is ready to receive your report." Vextar nodded. He had spent the last 3 days preparing for this moment. Around his neck he wore a small pendant made from a piece of the onion that had saved his life. It was a reminder of what he had learned about human wisdom. The main screen flickered to life, showing 5 elderly Zilithians sitting around a crescent-shaped table. These were the most powerful leaders in the Zilithian Empire. Their faces showed the pride and strength that had built their civilization. "Commander Vextar," said the center figure, High Counselor Zexran, "report on your mission to evaluate the human presence." "High Counselor, honored council members," Vextar began, "I have important news about the human species." "Yes, we expect." "You do," said another counselor. "When will the relocation to the work colonies begin?" Vextar took a deep breath. "Honored counselors, I recommend that humans be classified as strategic partners, not as a subject species." The silence that followed was long and uncomfortable. The council members looked at each other with surprise and confusion. "Strategic partners?" High Counselor Zexran's voice was cold. "Commander, these humans are primitives who have barely left their homeworld. What could they possibly offer the mighty Zilithian Empire? They saved my life," Vextar said simply. He told them the whole story. The jungle insects. The poison that their advanced medical technology could not identify or treat. The human doctor who used a simple onion to cure what Zilithian medicine could not. "An onion?" One counselor laughed. "You want us to form an alliance because of a vegetable?" "No," Vextar said firmly. "I want us to form an alliance because humans think in ways that we do not. They see solutions where we see only problems." He activated a holographic display showing his medical readings during the poisoning and recovery. "This data proves that the human treatment was completely effective. Our most advanced medical bay could not have achieved these results." "High." Counselor Zexran studied the data carefully. "This is indeed impressive, but one medical success does not justify changing centuries of imperial policy." "There is more," Vextar continued. "During my recovery, I learned about human problem-solving methods. They approach challenges differently than we do. They are not afraid to try new solutions, even if those solutions seem strange or simple." Another counselor spoke up. "Commander, you seem to have forgotten the natural order. Strong species rule over weak species. This has always been the Zilithian way." "With respect, honored counselor, strength is not just about physical power or advanced technology. The humans showed a different kind of strength. They helped an enemy who had threatened to enslave them. That shows moral strength." Vextar paused and touched the onion pendant around his neck. "They also showed intellectual strength. When our science failed, their knowledge succeeded." High Counselor Zexran leaned forward. "What exactly are you proposing?" "A formal alliance. We share our technology and military strength. They share their creativity and problem-solving skills. Together, we become stronger than either species could be alone." "And how would this help the Empire with our current problems?" asked another counselor. Vextar had been waiting for this question. "The rebel attacks in the outer territories, the pirates who use unconventional tactics, the supply line problems that our engineers cannot solve. These are exactly the kinds of challenges where human thinking could help us. You believe these primitives could solve problems that our best minds cannot? I believe different minds see different solutions. The poison that nearly killed me proves this point." The council members talked quietly among themselves for several minutes. Finally, High Counselor Zexran spoke again. "Commander, your proposal is highly unusual. It goes against everything the Empire has done for thousands of years." "Yes, honored counselor, it does. You are asking us to treat a primitive species as equals. I am asking us to recognize that they have value we do not possess." Another long silence followed. Vextar waited patiently. He knew this decision would Change the course of history for both species. Commander, the High Counselor said finally, you will remain on this planet for 1 more week. You will conduct detailed studies of human capabilities. If your findings support your claims, we will consider a limited partnership trial. Thank you, honored counselors. I will provide complete documentation of human abilities and knowledge. The communication ended. Vextar stood alone on his bridge, looking down at the human camp. This was just the beginning, but it was a good beginning. Later that day, Vextar met with Jake and his crew near the Aurora. The human ship was looking much better. Zilithian engineers had repaired the jump drive and reinforced the hull structure. Captain Morrison, Vextar said, I have spoken with my superiors. What did they say? Jake asked. They are willing to consider an alliance, but they want proof that humans can be valuable partners. Amy looked up from her work cataloging local plant species. What kind of proof? I need to document human problem-solving abilities. I need examples of how your people approach challenges differently than Zilithians do. Nick had an idea. What about your current military problems? The rebels and pirates you mentioned? Yes, that would be perfect. But I cannot share classified military information with non-allies. Lisa stepped forward. What if we prove ourselves first with smaller problems? Show you how we think and work before you trust us with bigger secrets? Vextar nodded. That is wise. I have been wondering, how would humans approach our supply line problems in the outer territories? Jake gathered his crew together. Tell us about the problem. Our cargo ships keep getting attacked by pirates. The pirates seem to know exactly when and where our ships will be. We have increased security, changed routes, used different schedules. Nothing works. Carlos thought about this for a moment. Have you considered that the pirates might have inside information? You mean a spy among our people? Vextar looked surprised. Or maybe they are intercepting your communications, or tracking your ships somehow. Amy added, on Earth, when we have problems like this, we look for patterns. We try to think like the enemy. Think like pirates? Vextar seemed confused by this concept. Yes, Jake said. If you were a pirate, how would you choose which ships to attack? Vextar considered this. I would attack the most valuable cargo with the least protection. Right. So maybe the solution is not stronger protection. Maybe it is making your valuable cargo look less valuable. Or making less valuable cargo look more valuable, Nick suggested. Create decoys that attract the pirates away from your real shipments. Vextar's eyes widened. That is not how we think about military problems. Because you think like soldiers, Lisa said. Sometimes you need to think like criminals or merchants or even like the cargo itself. These are the kinds of creative solutions I was talking about, Vextar said excitedly. My people would never think to make valuable cargo look worthless. Over the next several days, the human crew worked with Vextar to develop new approaches to various Zilithian problems. Amy shared her knowledge of biological systems and natural remedies. Nick taught alien medics about field medicine and improvised treatments. Carlos showed their engineers how to solve technical problems with simple tools and creative thinking. Most importantly, Jake and Lisa helped Vextar understand human diplomatic methods. They taught him about negotiation, compromise, and finding solutions that benefit everyone involved. Your people are remarkable, Vextar told Jake on their last evening together. We are just different, Jake replied. You have abilities we do not have, but together, we can accomplish things that neither species could do alone. I understand that now. When I return to the High Council, I will have dozens of examples of human innovation and creativity. Amy walked over carrying a small container. Commander, I have something for you. She opened the container to reveal several onion seeds. These are seeds from the onion that saved your life. You can grow them on any planet with the right soil and climate. Vextar took the seeds carefully. I will plant them on the capital world as a symbol of our new partnership. And I have something for you too, Vextar said to Jake. He handed him a small crystal device. This is a Zilithian communicator. It will allow you to contact me across any distance in space. Jake accepted the device with gratitude. Thank you. This means we can stay in touch as our peoples learn to work together. That night, both crews shared a meal together. Humans and aliens sat around the same fire, eating food from both worlds. They told stories, shared ideas, and began to understand each other as friends rather than strangers. The next morning, Vextar prepared to leave. His ship rose slowly from the jungle clearing, carrying him back to report to the High Council. But this time, his report would be very different from what anyone expected. Jake Morrison wiped sweat from his forehead as the transport ship shook through another pocket of turbulence. The metal floor vibrated under his boots, and he gripped the safety rail harder. Around him sat 3 alien cadets, each from a different world in the galaxy. This was his first time working with non-humans, and he tried not to stare at his new teammates. The reptilian creature sitting across from him had green scales that caught the light from the ship's windows. His name was Zethka, and he came from the Saurian Empire. The Saurians were famous throughout the galaxy for building incredible machines and computers. Their technology was hundreds of years ahead of Earth's best science. Zethka wore the same gray training uniform as Jake, but it had been modified to fit his longer arms and thick tail. Next to Zethka sat Velnara, a member of the insect-like Chitani species. She had 4 arms and large compound eyes that seemed to look in all directions at once. Her people were known for being perfect organizers. They could manage entire star systems without making a single mistake. Her uniform was also specially made, with extra sleeves for her additional arms. The third alien was the strangest of all. Koros came from the gas giant worlds where his people, the nebulae, lived as clouds of intelligent vapor. For this mission, he wore a special containment suit that let him take a roughly human shape. The suit was transparent, and Jake could see the swirling colors of Koros's gaseous body inside. The nebulae could survive in almost any atmosphere, which made them excellent space explorers. Jake was the only human in the group. Earth had only joined the Galactic Military Academy 5 years ago. Most alien species thought humans were primitive and backward. They had good reason to think this way. While other races traveled between stars and built cities that floated in space, humans were still fighting wars with simple weapons and barely had colonies on their own moon. The transport. Ship's pilot, another Saurian, spoke over the intercom. His voice was rough and deep. Cadets, prepare for landing. We will reach Zarian Prime in 10 minutes. Weather conditions are normal. Temperature is 45 degrees Celsius in the landing zone. Jake converted the temperature in his head. That was about 113 degrees Fahrenheit. Hot but not deadly. He had trained in hotter places on Earth. Zethka shifted nervously in his seat. I do not enjoy high temperatures, he said to the group. His voice had a slight hiss to it. My species prefers controlled environments. All species prefer controlled environments, Velnara replied. Her voice was sharp and precise, like someone reading from a manual. That is why we build cities and ships. Zarion Prime is classified as a hostile world. The Academy chose it to test our ability to survive without our normal advantages. Koros's gaseous form swirled faster inside his suit. When he spoke, his voice sounded like wind through a tunnel. My people have never needed to worry about planetary surfaces. We live in the upper atmospheres of gas giants. This will be interesting, Jake. Listened to his teammates talk about the challenges ahead. They all seemed worried about being away from their advanced technology and comfortable homes. This surprised him. On Earth, every human child learned basic survival skills. They learned how to find water, make fire, and build shelter. These skills were part of human culture because Earth was a dangerous world with wild animals, storms, and changing seasons. The Academy had briefed all the cadets about Zarion Prime. It was a desert world with 2 suns. During the day, temperatures could reach 50 degrees Celsius. At night, they dropped to minus 40 degrees Celsius. The planet had no intelligent life, but large animals lived in the deep desert. Most of these creatures were harmless plant eaters, but a few were dangerous predators. Survival time limit is 72 hours, Jake said. checking his mission notes on a small tablet. We each get basic survival gear, water purification tablets, emergency rations for 2 days, a thermal blanket, and a distress beacon. The distress beacon is only for true emergencies, Zethka added. Using it means failing the mission. Failure is not acceptable, Velnara said firmly. My species has a 97% success rate in Academy missions. I will not be part of the 3% that fails. The ship shuddered as it entered Xerion Prime's atmosphere. Jake looked out the window and saw an endless landscape of red sand and rocky mountains. The 2 suns hung in a pale yellow sky, making everything look harsh and bright. He had seen similar deserts on Earth, but never one that stretched to the horizon in every direction. Landing in 60 seconds, the pilot announced. Prepare for dust and wind. The weather station reports a sandstorm moving in from the east. It should miss the landing zone, but be ready for anything. The transport touched down with a heavy thump that made everyone bounce in their seats. The engines wound down with a high whine, and the rear cargo door began to open. Hot air rushed into the cabin, carrying the smell of dry sand and something Jake couldn't identify. It was sharp and metallic like the smell of rocks that had been baking in the sun for years. The 4 cadets gathered their gear and walked down the ramp onto the planet's surface. The heat hit Jake like a wall, but it was bearable. He had trained in the deserts of Nevada and Arizona. This felt similar, just hotter. His alien teammates reacted differently. Zethka immediately began breathing faster. His scales changed color slightly, becoming darker as his body tried to absorb less heat. Velnara's compound eyes reflected the bright sunlight, and she raised one of her 4 hands to shade them. Koros's gaseous form became more active inside his containment suit as the heat affected his molecular structure. Remember, Jake said, shouldering his pack, we need to find water and shelter before dark. On worlds like this, nighttime can be deadly. How deadly? Koros asked, his voice sounding strained. Jake looked at the endless desert around them. The transport was already lifting off, leaving them alone on the hostile world. Cold enough to kill us if we're not prepared. None of his alien teammates seemed to understand how serious that warning was. They came from species that had controlled their environments for thousands of years. They had never learned to fear the natural world the way humans had. As Jake watched them struggle with the heat and bright sunlight, he realized this mission would test more than just their survival skills. It would show them what it meant to be truly alone in a place that wanted to kill them. The sandstorm hit without warning just as the second sun began to set. What started as a gentle breeze became a howling wall of sand and rocks within minutes. Jake grabbed Velnara's arm and shouted over the wind, but his words were lost in the roar of the storm. The 4 cadets huddled together as their world disappeared behind a curtain of flying sand. Jake pulled his shirt over his nose and mouth to filter the air. His eyes burned from the sand, but he could still see a few feet in front of him. His alien teammates were in worse condition. Zethka's large eyes had closed completely, and he kept his head down to protect his sensitive scales. Velnara had wrapped her arms around her compound eyes, which were never designed for this kind of environment. Koros's containment suit was being sandblasted, and hairline cracks were starting to appear in the transparent material. The storm lasted for 2 hours. When it finally passed, the cadets found themselves scattered across a different part of the desert. Their original landing zone was nowhere to be seen. Worse, most of their supplies had been torn from their packs and lost in the sand. Jake checked his remaining gear, half his water, some food tablets, and his thermal blanket. The distress beacon was gone. Equipment check, Jake called to the others. They gathered in a small circle as the first sun disappeared completely. Only one sun remained in the sky, and it was setting fast. Zethka had lost everything except his water container and some emergency rations. His thermal blanket had been shredded by the wind. My distress beacon is damaged, he said, holding up a device with a cracked screen. It will not activate. Velnara had managed to keep most of her supplies, but her precise nature was breaking down under the stress. This was not in the mission parameters, she said, her voice higher than normal. Weather conditions were supposed to be stable for the first day. Koros was in the worst shape. His containment suit had multiple cracks, and he was losing small amounts of his gaseous form through the holes. "My suit integrity is compromised," he reported. "I can maintain this form for perhaps 6 more hours before I must return to my natural state." Jake looked at the horizon. The second sun was almost gone, and he could already feel the temperature starting to drop. On Earth, desert nights were cold, but not deadly. Zerion Prime was different. With 2 suns, the planet absorbed enormous amounts of heat during the day, but when both suns set, that heat escaped into space very quickly. The thin atmosphere could not hold warmth the way Earth's thicker air did. "We need shelter," Jake said. "And we need it fast." "There is nothing here," Sethka replied, looking around at the empty desert. "Just sand and rocks. My people would build an emergency shelter using our technology, but we have no materials. The Academy expects us to adapt," Velnara said, but her voice was uncertain. "There must be a solution we are not seeing." As the last sun disappeared, the temperature began to plummet. Jake felt the change immediately. The air went from warm to cool to cold within 30 minutes. His alien teammates felt it even more dramatically. Zethka was the first to be affected. As a reptilian, his body temperature depended on his environment. When the air grew cold, his metabolism slowed down. His movements became sluggish, and his thoughts became unclear. "I am experiencing thermal shock," he said slowly. "My systems are shutting down to preserve core functions." Velnara's compound eyes began to frost over as moisture in the air crystallized on their surface. Her forearms wrapped around her body, but her insect-like physiology had no way to generate internal heat. "I cannot see properly," she reported. "My visual systems are malfunctioning due to temperature variance." Koros was facing a different problem. As the air grew colder, his gaseous form began to condense. The molecular structure that kept him in a roughly human shape was breaking down. "I am approaching my condensation point," he said, his voice becoming harder to understand. "Soon I will not be able to maintain consciousness in this form." Jake watched his teammates deteriorating and felt something that surprised him. He was cold, but not dangerously so. His human body was designed to handle temperature changes. Millions of years of evolution on a planet with seasons had given him advantages his alien friends did not have. He could shiver to generate heat. His blood vessels could contract to keep warmth in his core organs. His brain could function normally even when his body temperature dropped several degrees. But these advantages would not save his teammates. In another hour, Zethka would be completely unconscious. Velnara would be blind and unable to move. Koros would condense into a liquid state that might kill him permanently. Jake was watching 3 of the galaxy's most advanced species being defeated by something as simple as cold air. "We need to try the distress beacons," Velnara said through chattering mandibles that were not designed to chatter. "This is an emergency." "Mine is broken," Zethka reminded her, but his words were slurred as his brain slowed down. "Mine was lost in the storm," Jake added. "Mine is functional," Koros said, but his gaseous form was becoming more dense and compact. "But if I activate it, we fail the mission." "Better to fail than to die," Velnara replied. Jake looked at his failing teammates and made a decision that would surprise them all. "Put the beacon away," he said firmly. "We're not going to die tonight." "How? Can you be certain?" Zethka asked. His reptilian eyes were half closed and his scales had turned a darker color as his body tried to conserve heat. Jake stood up and began walking in a wide circle around the group. He was looking at the ground, studying the patterns in the sand and the shapes of the rocks scattered around them. His teammates watched him with growing confusion. To their eyes, he was looking at nothing useful, just sand and stones and the remains of long-dead creatures. "What are you doing?" Velnara asked. Her compound eyes could barely track his movement. In the dim starlight, Jake stopped walking and looked at his teammates. They were 3 representatives of the most technologically advanced civilizations in the galaxy. Their species had conquered space travel, built artificial intelligence, and created wonders that humans could barely imagine. But they were about to die from something as basic as a cold night. because they had never learned to see their environment as anything other than an obstacle to overcome with machines. "I'm looking for building materials," Jake said simply. Koros's form swirled more slowly as the cold affected his molecular structure. "There are no building materials here. This is an empty desert." Jake smiled, and in that moment his alien teammates saw something in his expression that they had never seen before. It was the look of a predator that had found its prey, or a craftsman who had found the perfect tools for his work. It was the expression of a human who was about to do something impossible. "You're wrong," Jake said, walking over to a large bone that was bleached white by the desert suns. "There are building materials everywhere. You just have to know how to see them." He picked up the bone, which was longer than his arm and curved like a rib from some massive creature. As he held it up in the starlight, his alien teammates began to understand that their human companion was about to attempt something their advanced civilizations had never taught them. He was going to build shelter from the raw materials of a hostile world, using nothing but knowledge that had been passed down through millions of years of human survival. Jake moved through the darkness with purpose while his alien teammates watched from their huddled position. The temperature had dropped to 20 degrees below zero, and frost was forming on the rocks around them. Zethka could barely lift his head, and his breathing had slowed to almost nothing. Velnara had stopped trying to use her compound eyes and was feeling around blindly with her forearms. Koros was fighting to keep his gaseous form stable as the cold tried to turn him into liquid. But Jake seemed unaffected by the deadly cold. He walked from bone to bone, picking up pieces and examining them in the starlight. The desert was full of skeletons from the large creatures that lived on Xerion Prime. Most were from plant-eating animals that had died during the harsh summer months when water became scarce. The bones had been cleaned by scavengers and bleached, white by the twin suns. "What is he doing?" Zethka whispered to the others. His voice was so slow that each word took several seconds to say. "I do not understand his logic," Velnara replied. Her mandibles moved stiffly in the cold air. "Bones are organic waste material. They have no structural value." Jake heard their confusion but did not stop working. He had found what he was looking for, the rib cage of a creature that must have been the size of an earth elephant. The ribs were curved and strong, each one as tall as Jake himself. More importantly, they were arranged in a pattern that could form the framework of a dome. "Koros," Jake called softly. "Can you help me understand the wind patterns here?" Koros struggled to focus his condensing form. As a gaseous being, he could feel air currents and pressure changes better than any solid creature. "The wind comes from the northwest," he managed to say. "It follows the valley between those rock formations. There is a pocket of still air near that large boulder." Jake nodded and began dragging bones toward the spot Koros had identified. Each bone was heavy, but Jake's human muscles were designed for this kind of work. His species had evolved to hunt large animals and carry heavy loads across long distances. What seemed like impossible labor to his alien friends was just another day's work for a human body. "He is moving objects that weigh more than himself," Zethka observed with amazement. His reptilian brain was slow from the cold, but he could still appreciate the feat of strength he was watching. "How does his species generate such power?" Velnara asked. "His muscle structure appears similar to ours, but his performance is superior." Jake heard their questions as he worked. "Humans evolved on a world with strong gravity and dangerous animals," he explained while positioning a large femur bone. "We had to be strong to survive, but strength is not enough. Watch what I do next." Jake began connecting the bones together, using strips of fabric torn from his uniform and cables salvaged from their lost equipment. But he was not just tying them randomly. He was creating joints that could bear weight and flex with the wind. Each connection was placed at a specific angle based on principles of engineering that human builders had learned over thousands of years. The connection points follow mathematical principles, Velnara realized. Her compound eyes were still, frosted over, but her mind was sharp enough to understand what she was feeling with her hands. Each joint distributes stress across multiple support points. "Yes," Jake said, working faster as the temperature continued to drop. But I learned this from building tree houses as a child, not from mathematics classes. This statement confused all three aliens. Their species learned engineering through advanced education and computer modeling. The idea that a child could learn structural principles through play was completely foreign to them. Jake continued building his framework while explaining his process. The shape has to be a dome because domes are the strongest structures for their weight. The opening faces away from the wind. The bones are buried in the sand at the bottom for stability. The whole thing will be covered with sand to create thermal mass. Thermal mass? Koros asked weakly. His gaseous form was becoming more liquid-like as the temperature dropped toward his condensation point. Sand absorbs heat during construction when we breathe on it and move around inside, Jake explained. Then it releases that heat slowly throughout the night. It's like a battery for warmth. As Jake worked, his alien teammates began to contribute what they could. Zethka, despite his slowed metabolism, used his reptilian strength to help position the larger bones. His species might prefer controlled environments, but they were still physically powerful. Velinara used her forearms to sort the smaller bones by size and shape, applying her natural organizational skills to the building process. Koros, fighting to maintain consciousness, used his ability to sense air pressure to help Jake understand how the wind would affect their shelter. The dome structure will create a thermal layer, Jake continued, now connecting the upper ribs to form the roof. Warm air rises and gets trapped at the top. Cold air stays at the bottom, but we will be sitting above it on a platform made of flat bones. This knowledge is not taught in our academies, Zethka said with wonder. How do you possess such information? Jake paused in his work and looked at his alien friends. They were three of the most educated beings in the galaxy, trained by civilizations that had conquered space and time. But they had never learned the most basic lesson of survival: how to make the environment work for you instead of against you. Every human child learns this, Jake said simply. We call it camping. Camping, Velinara repeated the unfamiliar word. Going into the wilderness on purpose, Jake explained. For fun. Human families do it to teach their children how to survive without technology. We learn to make fire, build shelter, find water, and identify dangerous animals. It is part of growing up on Earth. The three aliens exchanged looks that would have been impossible to interpret for someone who did not know their species. But Jake was learning to read their expressions. They were experiencing something their advanced civilizations had never taught them to feel: respect for a supposedly primitive species. Your people deliberately place their offspring in dangerous situations? Koros asked, his voice becoming clearer as Jake's shelter began to block the wind. Not dangerous, Jake corrected. Challenging. There is a difference. Danger means you might die by accident. Challenge means you learn skills that prevent you from dying on purpose. Jake stepped back to examine his work. The bone framework was complete, forming a dome about 8 feet across and 6 feet high. It looked rough and primitive compared to the sleek technology his alien friends were used to, but it was solid and well designed. Now came the most important part. Help me gather sand, Jake said. We need to cover the outside completely, and then build sleeping platforms inside. As the 4 cadets worked together to cover their shelter, Jake noticed that his teammates were moving better. The wind protection was already helping them maintain their body heat. Zethka's movements were becoming faster as his reptilian metabolism responded to the slightly warmer air. Velinara's compound eyes were starting to clear as the frost melted. Koros's gaseous form was stabilizing as the pressure inside the shelter equalized. It is working, Zethka said with amazement. The interior temperature is rising. We are not dead yet, Velinara added, which was high praise from her practical species. I can maintain this form, Koros reported, his voice returning to its normal wind-like quality. Jake smiled as he helped his teammates arrange flat bones into sleeping platforms that would keep them off the cold ground. We will not just survive tonight, he told them. We will be comfortable. Outside their primitive shelter, the temperature continued to drop toward its deadly minimum, but inside, 4 cadets from different worlds worked together to create warmth and safety from nothing but sand, bones, and human knowledge that was older than all their civilizations combined. The shelter was complete, but Jake was not finished. While his alien teammates marveled at the structure they had built, Jake continued to make improvements that seemed to defy all logic. He created small channels in the sand floor that directed cold air away from their sleeping area. He positioned rocks in specific patterns that would absorb heat and release it throughout the night. Most surprisingly, he began collecting dried plant material that had blown against the rocks during the sandstorm. "What is the purpose of that organic matter?" Velnara asked. Her compound eyes had cleared enough for her to see again, and she was studying everything Jake did with intense focus. "Fire," Jake said simply, arranging the dried vegetation in a small depression he had carved into the sand floor. "Fire?" Zethka repeated the word with alarm. "You cannot create combustion inside an enclosed space. The smoke will poison us, and the heat will consume our oxygen." Jake looked at his saurian teammate with patience. "That is true if you build the fire wrong," he agreed. "But humans have been making fires in enclosed spaces for 50,000 years. We know how to do it safely." Koro swirled nervously inside his containment suit. "My people have never needed to create combustion. We generate energy through chemical processes, but I understand that fire creates toxic gases." "Only if you do it badly," Jake replied. He began digging a narrow channel from his fire pit toward the wall of the shelter. Then he created another channel that led from the outside to a point directly above where the fire would burn. Velnara watched his work with growing fascination. "You are creating an air circulation system," she realized. "Exactly," Jake said. "Cold air comes in through the bottom channel. It feeds the fire and carries smoke up through the top channel. The hot air from the fire rises and heats the dome, then circulates back down to warm us. The smoke goes outside and we breathe clean air." "This is impossible," Zethka protested. "Such a system would require precise calculations of air pressure, temperature differential, and combustion rates. You cannot perform such mathematics in your head." Jake laughed, and the sound was warm and confident in the cold night air. "I do not need mathematics," he said. "I just need to remember how my grandfather built fires in his cabin when I was 6 years old." This statement left all three aliens speechless. Their civilizations had developed fire-making technology through centuries of scientific research and engineering. The idea that a human child could learn the same principles by watching an elderly relative was beyond their understanding. Jake used a piece of metal from their damaged equipment to create sparks with a piece of flint he had found among the rocks. The dried vegetation caught fire immediately, and soon a small flame was burning steadily in the pit he had created. The smoke rose through his ventilation channel and disappeared outside, while warm air began to circulate through their shelter. "The temperature is rising rapidly," Chorus observed. His gaseous form was now completely stable, and his voice carried notes of wonder. "How did you know this would work?" "I did not know," Jake admitted, feeding more dried material to the growing fire. "I hoped it would work. If it had not, I would have tried something different." "You hoped?" Velnara's mandibles clicked together in confusion. "You risked our lives on hope?" Jake looked at his alien friends and realized they were facing a concept that their advanced civilizations had almost forgotten. "Hope backed by knowledge," he explained. "I know that humans have survived in conditions like this for thousands of generations. I know that the techniques they developed work because I am here. My ancestors lived long enough to have children, and their children lived long enough to have children, all the way down to me. That is proof that these methods work." Zethka's reptilian brain was now working at full speed in the warming air. "Your species carries survival knowledge in your genetic memory." "Not genetic," Jake corrected. "Cultural. We teach our children the same skills our parents taught us. Each generation learns from the one before. The knowledge gets better over time because the people who use bad techniques die, and the people who use good techniques live to teach their children." This concept was revolutionary to the three aliens. Their species had developed advanced technology so quickly that they had never needed to rely on generational knowledge transfer. They learned from computers and databases, not from their elders. Jake continued to demonstrate human survival techniques that seemed impossible to his teammates. He showed them how to identify which rocks would hold heat the longest by testing them with drops of water that steamed on contact. He explained how to read wind patterns from the way sand had drifted against obstacles. He even demonstrated how to use breathing techniques to generate body heat through controlled muscle tension. Your respiration is creating thermal energy, Velnara observed as Jake's breath became visible in the cold air. But this should not be possible without external fuel. The fuel is inside me, Jake explained. Food I ate yesterday is still burning in my muscles. I can control how fast it burns by breathing and moving in certain ways. You can consciously control your metabolism? Zethka asked with amazement. To some extent, yes, Jake replied. All humans can do this. We have to, because Earth has seasons. Sometimes it is hot, sometimes it is cold. We cannot just move to a different climate-controlled city every few months. As the night progressed, Jake continued to make small improvements to their shelter. He adjusted the ventilation to optimize heat circulation. He repositioned their sleeping platforms to take advantage of the warmest air currents. He even showed his teammates how to arrange their remaining supplies to create additional insulation. Most remarkably to the aliens, Jake accomplished all of this while maintaining a calm, confident attitude. He was not panicking or desperately trying to survive. He was simply applying knowledge that seemed as natural to him as breathing. What appeared to be miraculous problem-solving to his advanced alien friends was just another camping trip to a human. I do not understand how your species developed such capabilities, Koros admitted as they settled onto their sleeping platforms. The shelter was now warm and comfortable, heated by their small fire and insulated by the sand walls. We developed them because we had to, Jake replied, adding another piece of dried vegetation to the fire. Earth is a dangerous world. It has storms, earthquakes, floods, droughts, and ice ages. It has animals that want to eat us and plants that are poisonous to touch. Humans who could not adapt to changing conditions died out. Humans who could adapt survived and had children. So your entire species was shaped by survival pressure, Velnara said, understanding beginning to dawn in her compound eyes. Every species was shaped by survival pressure, Jake corrected. But your peoples became so good at controlling their environments that they forgot how to adapt when control is not possible. Tonight, you learned what it feels like to be powerless in the face of natural forces. For humans, that feeling never went away completely. Outside their shelter, the temperature had reached its deadly minimum of 40 degrees below zero. Any unprotected life would have died within minutes of exposure. But inside the primitive structure built from bones and sand, 4 cadets from different worlds shared warmth and safety. The aliens had learned that their human teammate possessed knowledge and skills that their advanced civilizations had never needed to develop. Your people must be proud of such abilities, Zethka said as he settled down to sleep on his platform of flat bones. Jake smiled and adjusted the fire one last time before lying down. Most humans think these skills are old-fashioned and useless, he said. They prefer to live in cities with computers and machines to take care of everything. That is unfortunate, Velnara replied. Tonight you have shown us that the old ways have value that technology cannot replace. As the 4 cadets fell asleep in their impossible shelter, Jake realized that this mission had taught him something important too. His human heritage was not something to be ashamed of in a galaxy full of advanced civilizations. It was a strength that could complement alien technology and knowledge. Sometimes the oldest solutions were still the best solutions, even in an age of space travel and artificial intelligence.